Welcome to Being Curious podcast show, proudly supported by Moss Skin, a UK-based skincare line infused with sea moss. Good afternoon, Catherine. I just want to introduce you to Being Curious as a podcast of just talking to people about their journey, where they're at so far. I'm inviting you to kind of give me a sense of where you're at in your thinking and a journey of your life. So, Catherine Lawerence, thank you for agreeing to have a discussion with me today. Tell me a bit about yourself. Where would you like to begin, Catherine?
Well, I could start with where I grew up and how I began, how I entered this world. I was born and bred in South London, but from Jamaican parents, first generation, who moved to this country in the 60s. And I am the third of three siblings in UK, of which there is 8 or more of us.
Wow.
In Jamaica. So there's 2 that so my dad had 6 and my mum had 6. So 6 with my mum, and my mum had 6 children before. So it's quite a huge family. I was brought up first of all in Stockwell, Brixton to Stockwell, and then I moved on to Peckham, and then Woolworth Road, where I had a child at a young, tender age of 17, and was a single parent, subsequently a single parent. And I, the rest of my life was about parenting her, educating myself, supporting my family, and then becoming a Buddhist.
Oh my God. There's so much richness there. I don't even know where to begin. But my curiosity kind of lands with your early part of your childhood. What was it like to be, I assume, one of the youngest here in the UK?
Yes.
But obviously you come from a big family. So what was that like to be you in that dynamic?
To be quite honest, I didn't know much difference, did I? Obviously that's my natural way. And I was very fortunate to have a mum that always told me stories about my siblings in Jamaica. So even though I never really met them, I grew to know them and was very familiar with them prior to meeting them, which I did do in my 40s when I accompanied my dad to my first visit to Jamaica when I was in my 40s, and I met them, my siblings, for the first time, which was very, very illuminating for me in terms of where I came from, understanding my parents better and my father and mother better, knowing that, my grandparents, etc., which was a very enriching and very poignant part of my development, particularly my healing. So being the third youngest is a really fantastic, in the UK, I was very close in age with my youngest brother, so I was more closely related with him. And I had 2 older sisters, and those days we used to share bedrooms, as you know, small apartments with sharing of bedrooms. So I shared the bedroom with my second sister, who took me under her wing and taught me how to read, helped me with my reading and things like that. But no, I was quite a quiet child and quite introverted, and I don't really know, but introverted externally. Within the family, I was very talkative and very chatty, but externally,
introverted externally, but within the family system, an extrovert. My question to you is that you said that you was a young mum, and I wonder how that led you also into Buddhism, or are they disconnected?
They're quite disconnected. They're disconnected in some ways, and obviously everything is interconnected in some ways as well. In that I've always been always been interested in spiritual and esoteric practices from a very young age. From the age of 13, I remember my first project at school was in astrology. And I was always very questioning of life, meaning, why, wherefores. And in fact, I was, whilst my daughter was growing up, I noticed the intensity of the experiences that I was having. And I felt that these experiences the causes of my life struggles wasn't in this life. So it made sense. It made sense to look into philosophies that speak about karma. And I think it's important to add that prior to that, I was very much towards Christian values. And even though I wasn't baptized as a Christian, and I used to visit many different types of churches with my mum, because my mum used to go to all different types of churches. Now, she's self-proclaimed both Catholic and Christian. And my dad was brought up amongst Catholics as well, but wasn't a practitioner. And they gave us that freedom to choose which religion.
That is really lovely. I'm listening to you. And again, I think there's more. I don't know if I obviously need to invite you before I even started onto another show, because there's so much richness here. But there's a sense of you being able to explore your thinking and philosophy at quite a young age. It sounds really kind of interesting. What was it about Buddhism, or what is it about just expanding your mind and thinking about your thoughts that made you want to do that at such a young age? Because I can imagine most 13-year-olds probably don't think that way.
It wasn't when I was 13 that I decided on Buddhism. No, it wasn't. It was more towards esoteric, finding out astrology, numerology, finding out more. And my journey, even, within my 20s, etc., went into crystal energy and different kinds of, as I said, it was predominantly rooted in Christianity. But it was also moving over to esoteric.
Okay.
It wasn't
at that time when you was in your 20s.
Yeah.
Would you see yourself still as a Christian, or would you? Because you also said you're moving on to the esoteric as well.
Yes and no. I was identifying as a spiritual person, and the most important, as opposed to Christianity. It was moving towards, even though I was still looking at the Bible, reading the Bible and trying to find more meaning. The journey took me to Buddhism when actually a friend of mine, it was just a friend of mine, made a passing comment, which is that I reminded her of a Buddhist. So that started my quest to look into Buddhism. And I was looking into many different types of religions. I looked into, even the Muslim faith. Mormonism, all different types of faiths, and I was reading into them. So I was on a search. I was on a spiritual quest, because I truly believe that to be any form of spiritual journey, there needs to be a discipline. And I felt the need for a discipline, and that was more so than the actual faith itself.
Can I just ask you a bit more about that? You said actually you needed a sense of discipline.
Yeah.
What was lacking, or what did you want to gain? Because I don't think that everything is always about lacking, but I don't know what the right words are at this moment in time. But what was you needing to kind of find what you was looking for? Why did it need to have structure or some kind of organisation?
That's a very good question. You see, I think when it comes to any form of spiritual practice, I think the community element of it is quite important. I think that gives it more strength and protection, in that you find that you could be open to, many of environmental influences. And I think having a community, and I don't know if you aware of this, but when there's more than one of you carrying out a faith, it creates a vacuum, a form of vacuum in the environment, that creates more powerful change. The other thing is that I noticed that I didn't have that much consistency in the way that I was doing my practice. And I did feel that consistency was also very important. So the Buddhist faith, and the one in which I embarked upon, which is what you call Soka Gakkai Buddhism, you needed for you, number one, not to be alone, which is based on the mentor-disciple relationship. Number two, you get always consistently supported within your district, that is in the place in which you live. And thirdly, there's all different activities that train you in humanistic values. But most critically, the practice involves a daily practice of prayer and meditation, which must be done in the morning and the evening. Now, that requires a lot of commitment and a high degree of discipline to sit there for 10 minutes minimum, 10 minutes. When I started, it was 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. Now it could be an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening.
So it's really changed. It's interesting what you're saying in terms of actually having community, having a, discipline and a structure around you, because it's only recently in psychology, again, I think it probably has been spoken about, but the need for people to have a sense of connection, that there's a sense in kind of the world that there are more people feel isolated and on their own than ever before, even though we have technology to kind of support us in our connections. So there's something about the practice that you have embarked on really connects you with the community and the community with you. But there's also something about the structure in which you have to discipline yourself, like having the practice. You started off at 10 minutes and you're now in an hour of prayer in the morning and the evening. How easy was that to do? How did you get from 10 minutes to an hour? Because sometimes I really struggle with concentrating.
It's a muscle. You're building up a muscle, aren't you, within yourself, because it wasn't easy at first. I mean, 10 minutes is a very long time, to when you first start, and to interrupt, to try and fit in another 10 minutes in the evening in a particular way, recitation of a Sanskrit verse plus chanting. You do need to have something that drives you to want to do that. And for me, the thing that drove me was was challenges and struggles. And this is the wonderful thing about Buddhism, is that Buddhism teaches turning poison into medicine. And turning poison into medicine means that you take, the driving force to bring out Buddhahood is the actual problem. So if there's no problem, then there's no driving force. So if there's no suffering.
Poison, say that again, the poison and the chalice. Did you say poison and chalice?
Poison into medicine. It's a principle
poison into
medicine. Poison into medicine.
So you have to struggle, that encompass struggle on your journey.
Yes,
to get where you need to get to. Is that
it's a very fundamental part, because it's recognized that in life there is four sufferings, and all human beings have those four sufferings, and those four sufferings can consider, it's to quote, a birth, old age, sickness, and death, which every single human being will encounter in their life. There is a form of suffering around those four things. And through chanting, you purify your life, and they change into what we call the four virtues. And those four virtues is purity, and let's see if I can remember, purity, true self, happiness, and eternity. So birth, old age, sickness, and death suffering transforms just without any focus into nirvana, which is a form of joy in our life, and that purification of our senses.
So how do you make sense of the world that we're living in? Because I am a psychotherapist and I support individuals, families and couples, and I have clients over the years that have identified that they really struggle and they're struggling, and they really struggle to kind of be at peace with the world and don't like the suffering part, want to kind of erase that and jump to the joy part. How does your practice and your beliefs, help someone who is really struggling to connect with themselves and all parts of themselves on a journey?
Well, that's this thing is, you have to understand that a lot of chanting is about being enlightened, and being enlightened is the opposite of being in disillusionment. So the way that and there's two forces that are taking place in life, which is darkness and light. Very simple, put very simply. So when we start to become very clear, and this is where the theoretical teachings come into play, to become clear of the difference between illusion and enlightenment. And the truth in Buddhism is that Buddhahood is everywhere, and that it depends where. So that means that a beautiful, profound life state is in everything, including what we perceive as suffering. That could be a source of suffering. Okay, so those situations, when we start to see that they are perfect in every single way for what we need at this moment in time in our life, and to utilize that to bring our own Buddhahood out. And that's what it's that fuel that enables us to bring out the joy, the happiness.
That sounds really lovely. And I could actually see for some people that resonates really well, that actually, from my understanding of you, is that actually we can use our experiences, whether it's difficult or not, as a source of learning and growth.
Yes.
Within that. But for some people who are wanting dopamine hits, who are addicted to video games or alcohol or I don't know, food or work, might not want to feel the feelings but want to kind of have a shortcut to life. How do you get them to settle and open their mind and embody the journey of which that you've talked about through your practice?
I love what you're saying, because to be quite honest with you, with my particular journey, I'm not no pureness and light journey. My life has been involved in many the ordinary, what we call the muddy swamp, where the lotus blossoms from, which means that the lotus blossom, the beautiful flower that's symbolic that in Buddhism is that the muddy swamp in itself creates, that is the most important part of the experience. Why?
Oh, really?
Why? Yes, because without having a full understanding of what the muddy swamp look like, how can one have compassion for humanity? How would you have a true picture of what it is to take a journey from that journey to the journey of enlightenment, where you make those choices, because everything is a choice. So there is no judgment where somebody is at that time. If they enjoy, if they truly enjoy playing on the computer or having a drink or whatever, that's fine. But if you have to be, but even in that place, they can start chanting. And through doing the chanting, their wisdom opens. And when your wisdom opens, you start making different decisions.
So it's almost that actually I'm going to meet you where you're at.
Yes.
And where you're at could be messy and complicated and muddy.
Yeah.
But within that, if you start to chant,
yes,
then you will find that actually some wisdom that will come from that and will move you on a bit.
Absolutely.
And so it's of that. So have there been times where you gave up practice, that you didn't practice in your early days? Because it sounds like here at this moment in time,
Yes.
and your responsibilities, I suppose, in your practice, you're much more mature and evolved.
Yes,
But
I
are
have
there
to
things
say,
that you didn't?
when I first joined the practice, I was practicing for a while, and there was a lot of, just for a short time, I was going to meetings, but I noticed that my life was getting very messy. Okay, it wasn't particularly that tidy. I think problems were becoming more intense. So yes, it was very nice to start chanting, but problems became intense, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that if you've got a pipe sitting in your garden for many, many years, and then you throw water through it, a lot of dirt's going to come out of that pipe first. Okay? Before the clear water can run clear, I was going through the dirt phase of my practice, but that wasn't clear for me that that's what was going on. I found it quite frightening, and I started questioning what was going on as I'm not doing this anymore. So what kind of thing is this?
What made you feel that it was your practice? Like, you're right. I think there are lots of things come out, even as me as a kind of therapist, and I work with people, lots of difficult material comes out first before you get to those kind of areas where people are able to kind of work on and still have capacity to listen to and attend to difficult stuff, as well as move forward with their own values and find their way. But what made it feel like you had to abandon your practice? Or did you see it as an abandonment? Did you notice? Because sometimes it's like starting something that you really love, what's good for you, and then you stop. Did you notice that you stopped? And did you notice that you was moving away? Or was it a gradual progression?
No, it was an exact choice, because it made me question exactly what it is that I'm doing. I'm chanting words that are in Sanskrit that I'm not used to. And I didn't still know enough. And this is why the study element of the practice is important, and why the close proximity of support is important as well while you're going through the practice. Just like how you would do in psychotherapy, you would need to have somebody that you could touch base with to share, this is what's happening. They can navigate you through that. I didn't do that because I was accustomed to being isolated. I slipped back into my isolated ways. I made that decision very, very, I was very consciously, very personal decision, and I just slipped away. Now that took, that was a year. So I'd say I practiced for 1 year and I stopped for 1 year. And then my life was just taken off even more. It was becoming even more critical in that year. And then I come across a practitioner who met me at one of the meetings, and I was telling her of some of my challenges, problems that I was having. And I'm telling you, everything was kicking off in every area, in housing, relationships, confident, everything. A lot of things that was karmically sitting in my life had been triggered. And in that year, they were still going on. So I was telling her about some of them, and she said to me, what are you still chanting? What's happening? You still chanting while you're going through this? I said, no. She goes, what are you doing? You need to be chanting. And that day was the only push I needed for me to get back onto the bandwagon, seriously this time. And with consistent daimoku, knowing exactly how to chant, with what intention I needed. And then I started to see the actual, shall I say the amazingness or the wonder of how my life took on the let's call it, what shall I call it, epic adventure of showing how the mystic law integrated into my life and made things in a way that was how I could be in control.
It's really lovely to hear that you kind of, one, that you opened up to someone and you said, this is how I'm feeling, this is where I'm at. That, and also probably at the same time, they asked you the right question so that you could, it's something that resonated with you. But this time round, your commitment was different, that you really kind of embodied the journey more. You had more knowledge or more sense of what you needed to do.
Absolutely. I was more the problems became, I was now using the problems. I was now using the problem. I could see that this was like a abandoned ship. You know, it's all very well sailing the stormy sea on a ship and jumping out of that ship, yeah, and then end up in the sea itself. And then somebody said, "Get back on board." I get back on board that ship, and then the ship became the ship over the sea of suffering, and my Daimoku navigated that ship. So it was actually somebody else's faith that pushed me. It was her faith, and this is where the mentor disciple came in.
Can you just say that? Sorry, it was someone else's faith. So was it someone else's faith in you, or someone else's faith in a greater vision?
It was for me. It was somebody else's faith in the greater in the practice itself that drove me, and also the fact that somebody was urging me to fight for my happiness. I mean, oh my gosh, at that time I did not know that was possible. That's the first thing. Secondly, I mean, that level of compassion that moved me, but I didn't see it at the time. This is really important. I didn't see it as a time of compassion. I just saw it as somebody handing me a rope to bring me back in. That's it.
That is so lovely, because I think in my practice as a psychotherapist, when I lend myself to someone suffering and ask them to be on board with the practice of healing and counselling in a journey, that actually sometimes people are not there yet, and they just need that support. And it's not that I'm steering their ship. I'm just sitting maybe in their car and they are driving the car, and I'm sitting by them and I'm offering kind of encouragement and support. But for people who don't know and can't see Catherine, she is a beautiful Black woman with her hair wrapped up in locks. So my question to you, as a Black practicing Buddhist, what was that like? Because I can imagine back in the day, there wasn't many people around who came of an Caribbean background, of African heritage.
To be quite honest with you, it meant nothing to me. It didn't make any difference to me whatsoever. Yeah. The teachings is the teachings of empowerment and equality. Okay, now, the lady that introduced me happened to be a Black lady who originated from Jamaica. I could identify with that. I was also introduced by a gentleman who was born and bred in England, a white Caucasian gentleman, very lovely man. Both of them introduced me. He introduced me first. She met me at a meeting, and she's the one that reinstated my practice. And I am still very close friends with both of them after so many years, and we still have dialogue over our practice. And I think what is so amazing is that the practice is not like evangelism in that regard. It is a way of life, and it's a way of life that we all have in common. So we can identify the journey of life with this, which is a very positive view. It's a very empowering and positive way that does not focus on differences. In fact, it enriches with the differences, a culture of different people bringing together, that's brought together to create something for the wider.
It sounds really lovely, because I think a lot of religions, or maybe beliefs or systems of practice, feels like for some people others benefit and others don't benefit. Or I suppose if I kind of look at the history of Christianity, although there's some beautiful narratives there, for some of it, I also have to recognise that the Church of England was part of slavery. So as a Black British individual, I find it quite complicated. So for you to meet people from different walks of life, and you're on a journey of shared practice, that sounds something really lovely to have in a practice.
You used an operative word. You used the word shared practice. This is an important word that we use also in our Buddhist faith, which is shared struggle.
Oh, tell me about. So how do you hear me then? Do you hear me as saying shared practice, or what is shared struggle, so people can understand what shared struggle means?
Shared struggle is everybody got the same vision in their heart for world peace, and that everybody got something being brought together through struggles in their own personal life. And because we understand that, we join the practice, or we start practicing because we've got personal problems. But during the course of the practice, you start to see the bigger vision because your life state expands. So it's no longer just about your happiness. You start to see that your life is on a mission. That is no accident that you will become. You see everything as absolutely in order and correct and perfect, in accord with what the one's life needs. Now, when we see our life as a continuum, eternity, and we recognize that actually I chose this life, I chose these parents, you can take responsibility from an empowered viewpoint as opposed to a victimized viewpoint. The responsibility from an empowered viewpoint is I chose this. Now, even whether I remember that or not in this lifetime, being reminded of that gives me the capacity to be able to overcome that. And not only just overcome it, transform it. And not only transform it for me, transform it for others. Because we're all interconnected. So then you become even more than you started. And it doesn't matter what the problem is.
I'm going to ask you, there's so much stuff I would love to ask you. And I no doubt, to bring you back again. But what's really interesting for me is this the idea of choice. Because some people, when they're suffering and when they're hurting, they might have not chosen some of the experiences that they had. And so that would be very difficult to own. And I wouldn't invite them, I don't know, as a psychotherapist, would I invite them to own some of the things that have happened, especially in the younger parts of them, in terms of the trauma parts. Yeah. You wouldn't necessarily say that. However, there are things, I suppose, that we choose, and we choose continuously, but sometimes we don't want to own, because actually that really creates kind of, if we had to own something, we have to take responsibility, and then we have to do something. So in your practice, when people are struggling with addiction or struggling, and addiction in the broader sense, so it could be food, it could be sex, it could be work, it could be, getting into certain arguments, you're choosing your sense of self, you're choosing these experiences. How does Buddhism understand that? And how can we learn, of non-practicing beings, how can we learn to kind of direct our energies into something that may be much more beneficial, and for ourselves, but for those around us?
When you think about yourself as from the point of view of mission, a mission means what is your value, what is important to you? You might be in all of those situations, yeah? But the thing that might be important to you at that moment is just to feel a glimpse of happiness or something. It could be the most smallest thing. You might not, with that. And this is why one would take, substances, for instance, or get addicted in sex. These things all got something in common. They always make the person, number one, come out of the difficult situation, forget about it temporarily, and feel happy in what they perceive as happiness, that one person could perceive, or I'm going to use the word we, because we've all gone through that. But then you have to understand, what is happiness? What does that really, we all know we want it. But the more pain, that polarity of pain, pain, pleasure, polarity. When one is in pain, one is always they're desiring this because they're aware of this. They're not going to be in pain if they're not aware of this, because this would be an acceptance. This would be like a contentment. So to give an example, the polarization of violence is beauty. The polarization of there's a polarization of everything. So the more violent the person is, the more beauty they're not able to reach, that they're aware of.
So can I just sorry for cutting you. I just want to say that people can imagine and see. You're using polarization for your hands, like left to right, opposite, hot and cold,
up
and down,
cold.
side, yeah. And so from what you're saying is that the opposite of violence would be beauty. The more you move towards violence, the less you're likely to achieve beauty. Is that what you're saying?
I would say the more that you want beauty and not know how to get there, the more you get involved in violence. Yes, there's complete different things. It's the desire.
Okay, so why would it be different things? What is it about that way that you understand it in that way? The more that you don't achieve beauty, you will try and achieve it in other ways, and other ways could lead towards violence.
You have to remember this. You have to remember this, like anger and rage. You have to remember that these are all very subconscious things. So it's not that somebody is consciously aware that they are looking for beauty, or that they are consciously aware that they are choosing violence. And you must remember, my true belief is that most people are good. They just don't know how to do it.
So your belief is most people are good, but
Yes.
they don't know how to do it.
Yes, exactly. Because it takes courage. The three qualities of the Buddha is courage, compassion, and wisdom. Yeah. And by chanting, you bring out these qualities within yourself. Okay. So you start to have a deeper understanding of things that you do in your life, and you start to see more wiser. So I'm not talking about intelligent, and I'm not talking about something critical. I'm talking about one's own, how can I put it, realization coming from not only what they studied, but what come also from their own life. Because each person knows their own life path on a deep, they know how they got there. But by chanting, you go even deeper. You go even deeper to understand the intricacies of how you got there. But that's still not that important. What is important is always going to be where you are now, how you feel now, and what are you doing with your life now to create causes for a better future. So it's always about this.
So there's awareness. There's an awareness. Sorry for cutting you. There's an awareness of when you start chanting, it opens up a connection to you and your journey and where you're at and what's happened to you. But the most important part is what you're doing now, in the here and now, being in the present moment.
Yes.
And it's not about being in the past, and it's not about being in the future. So in some ways, I think when I look at psychotherapy and we talk about depression and we talk about anxiety, lots of people are mourning, are in depression because they're in the past, or they're so far ahead with anxiety that they're predicting something that's not yet to happen. And so therefore they're not able to kind of move on. But there's something about what you're saying is, yes, all this stuff around us is really important through chanting, but it's what's happening in the here and now. So what's happening between both of us is more important than what's happening in the past or what's going to happen next.
Yes.
In some places.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's no accident the word present it's about now, as in present, the gift. This is the moment that we can create the most. We cannot create anything by looking at the past. And we certainly don't even know what the future look like. But what we can do is have an idea of how we want our future to be. And based on wise choices for now, we can make causes based on the principle of cause and effect. We can make causes for the type of future we want. So that cause could be something most simple, like having this discussion, right? What we're doing now, The cause of waking up opening our eyes in the morning and getting up is a cause for us to get on with the rest of that day. The cause to open our front door and lock the door is a cause for not only keeping the house secure, is that now we're out into the fresh air. And the cause of putting one foot in front of the other means we're going to get somewhere. Everything is case by case. Each person's karma and makeup is very different from the next person's one. So this is very important. We're individuals, authentic individuals, and each person has their own inner struggle. So that inner struggle is not to be compared to that one or that one. We all placed here for our own individual reason. What I bring is pertinent to the people that I attract in my environment. What you bring is pertinent to the people that you attract in your environment, which means that those are the exact right people and you are the exact right person to assist those people on that journey, which they want to go to. They want to be on that journey. Because people that come to a psychotherapist are usually people that want to be free of what is their own perceived shackle, so to speak.
It is. I'm listening to you, and I feel like there's lots of possibilities for people who are struggling to find a different way of dealing with pain or suffering. And sometimes I think, people do come to counsellors, therapists, and at the right time, and you can go on a journey with them. But sometimes people really struggle to connect with the individual or the material on which they need to kind of examine, because they're not just there. And I think there's many ways, and it's not by chance, I think, that in recent time, in terms of psychotherapy, when you listen to a lot of the American psychotherapists and psychologists, most of them have a Buddhist practice. And I find that really interesting. People that I love, Tara Brach, Rick Hansen, I can name some more, but they all have a Buddhist practice, and a long-standing, as part as a really kind of started when they were younger. Why, or is it religion in the sense? And I don't want to discredit, and I haven't spoken to people of other faiths, and I think that's an invitation to do something else in another show. But what is it about Buddhism? Why does it lend itself to suffering in a way psychotherapy can embrace it?
I do think that they're not two separate things. The thing is, Buddhism is about our daily, the humanistic element. We're humans. Psychotherapy is aimed at humans, isn't it? It's not aimed at animals. It's a humanistic practice. It's a humanistic practice that helps us to navigate in the worldly realm in a way that we can do so with that feel safe and secure in our human, navigate it. So it's not about. Let's put it this way. The problem in Buddhism, you may have a problem, and only the thing that is perceived as a problem is something that one doesn't understand how to navigate. But when one can see how to navigate and feel capable of navigating, there's no problem. So the suffering is caused by the inability or the ignorance of not knowing what to do or recognizing that we could do anything about it. The element of practice is to use that for us to grow towards that and grow bigger than that, so we can take care of it, so we become empowered. We're not just doing that for ourselves, we're doing that for others. Other people is watching that happen, so they can say, oh, I can do that. Would you show me how to do it? That gives that person that inspiration to say, if you could do it, I can do it. It's like somebody being very ill and then becoming well again through their own sheer determination, in their own self-belief, that they can heal themselves. All they need to do, the very first thing a person needs to do is make the decision. It doesn't have to be written down. I'm talking about that conviction in one's heart that says, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to become this. And this is how I am going to be. And then when we do that, and we do that with the recognition of wanting to improve the life of all humanity, not just ourselves, because we know what it is to suffer. And when you know what it is to suffer, you don't really want to see other people suffer the same suffering that you did. So those people who have got similar suffering to what you had encountered will not only recognize what you're saying, you would have the language for them because you are the one who went through exactly that same suffering. So it's not for oneself that we overcome difficulty. We overcome difficulty for the sake of humanity. And I don't know if you heard of the butterfly effect, that, if the butterfly floats its wings here, say in China, it will cause a earthquake in Australia. This is the same effect when one chants and raises the vibration of oneself. When you raise the vibration of oneself, you're raising the vibration of everyone that is in your environment.
It's interesting that you said about the butterfly effect in chanting, because there's been some research I came across where when people chanted, crime went down. But actually, when people connected and resonated on a very deeper level, the whole community, and it's a bit like in psychology where we say if someone is happy, and there's some research around happiness, that if I am happy, my neighbors are happy too. And I can imagine that kind of energy, that kind of just moves out into the community. And I also feel when I see clients who come in and they're feeling quite sad, and I want to acknowledge their sadness and be with their sadness, but often you find just because maybe my energy and their energy together, something kind of transforms within it. What would you want people to know? This is a short show, and this is a conversation about your thoughts and where you're at in your thoughts. And obviously it's contained, isn't it, within a 45 minutes kind of space. What would you want us to understand and know before we start kind of winding down our discussion today? What clarity or vision should we take away if we want to start to practice? What do we do next?
Wow, that's quite powerful. That's not an easy task. Okay, I would say that each person has come to this earthly, into the world system with a special gift. And I believe that gift is only them that is able to give it. And it doesn't matter what it is and how it's viewed by them. I still feel that is something that we all have to offer in one way or the other, to enrich, help, support, help someone else to be happy, whether that be a smile, have a lovely smile, have a lovely voice, have something that uplifts and bring to humanity. And I think I would say, let's not judge ourselves, and learn the lesson in not. And I'm saying it's supposed to be one thing, you said, isn't it? You said one thing and I'm going in to more. But I would say that gift, let's not judge it. Let's not criticize it. Let's not compare it. Let's just do it. Let's just give it. Let's give it appreciation. The more we appreciate our gift, the more our gift will bring value to our life.
Oh, that sounds really powerful. That sounds really, I think definitely the judgment side. I think we can be quite critical, can't we? And think that we should have, if we're going to do it, you have to be really perfect at it. And I'm listening to you today, and it feels like, through your discussion, there's a journey, and there's been times where you've paused. There's been times where you've lent into others, and they've given you comfort and advice and support, and that propelled you into your own thinking. I've listened to you today, and you said, actually, I'm human, but actually I don't come complete. There are times where I'm still working through the things that I need to. But most of all, it feels like actually it's really important for people to kind of understand that it's a journey, and that to not be so judgmental, because I think sometimes that stops us from trying in the first place. If we're curious about Buddhism, is there any books that we should be reading, or is there any places that we should go? How would I find out where to go if I'm interested and curious?
I think there's a really good resource online, and it's called SGI. Since let's take for granted that the audience is from UK, and there's a website called sgi.org.uk. That website has a wealth and breadth of resource, and it will also, there is a section in there where you can find out more, and you will be, you can just put a form in, and somebody will contact you and put you in contact with your local district. And as I said, the practice is powerful, so it's not something I would recommend one does on their own. It's not a theoretical practice. It's a practice, which means that the action of chanting and going to the meetings is the best way, and attending the meetings, whether that's online or in person, is the best way to really get a sense of what the practice is all about. Ordinary people with extraordinary lives. Ordinary people.
Oh, I am so loving that. Catherine Lawerence, thank you for being curious. Thank you for giving up your time and your wisdom and your insight and your learning. Deeply appreciate it. I think the audience will take away a lot from our discussion today, or if not, just a nugget of wisdom. I thank you very much for agreeing to sitting down with me today.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for bringing me in. Much appreciated. It's really enjoyable. It was lovely to talk to you, Cornetta.